last week alone, we spent money from what you did with this record on 8,000 more children so they'd have something to eat for this foreseeable future, and 300,000 people accessing health for the first time ever. And that's this small pop song. So if you can get to it, just keep streaming, find the shop, go and buy it, because between that hungry child and that meal is this record and you. And I swear to you that we have no agency, we have no control over the horrors in Ukraine or the horrors of Palestine, the fear of what Trump will do next, the fear of the cost of living and inflation and climate change. But with this single issue, with this one issue, we have agency, we have power, we can actually change another's life. Virgin
Radio. Today's guest has landed. He's I don't want to say he's a friend of mine, because that wouldn't be a bit over the top, but we know each other.
I'm your senior.
You're definitely my senior. You were a few years ahead of me in school.
I was a few years ahead of you in school.
By years, I mean decades.
I set the scholastic standard, which you failed to live up to.
Correct. You've sold a few records, and you might know him from his time in the Boomtown Rats, or from being the mastermind behind Live Aid. And of course, Band Aid is the 40th anniversary. God help us, making us feel a little bit old. But I have to say, as a fellow Irishman, I'm very proud to see you again. Bob Geldof, welcome aboard. Nice to see you as always. I want to go straight to you and Paula and baby Fifi watching the 6 o'clock news in October 40 years ago. And I'd love you to take us to what happened in your head when you saw Michael Burke reporting and talking about Ethiopia. What happened in your head and your heart?
Well, the entire thing depended on my psychological mood at that moment, whether I was more alert to somebody else's tragedy as opposed to mine, and I think that explains it. The first thing to remember is that it was the 6 o'clock news on the BBC. There were two available news, ITV, BBC. Most people came home from work, watched the 6 o'clock news. That's very different to today. So that's the first thing to remember. The Rats had a very good track called Dave, which was about a band member who was also in our school, who came home from a tour with the Rats. He played sax. We dropped him off at his flat. He went in and found his girlfriend dead. He called me at about 3 a.m. My response, groggy from sleep, was inadequate. And the next morning I woke up feeling bad that I hadn't behaved like a friend, and wrote this song. And the band unusually really liked this song. Pete Townsend said it was his single of the year. I thought we were straight into the charts again. That wasn't so. The Rats had sort of peaked and were now tapering off. And there were new kids around. Duran Duran, Spandau Ballet, Boy George Michael. And they had new things to say, but it's very hard to accept that. And I did accept it intellectually, but creatively it's difficult. And
so
I thought,
you were feeling low, or is that what you're saying?
Yeah, low, because I'd just come back from the record company trying to get this thing going, and there were no takers on the radio. So I came back thinking, is that the end of the best part of my life? Thanks very much, you know.
Yeah.
And I walked in, and there was the missus with our baby of 8 months, Fifi. And I slumped down, and I didn't say anything. But we turned on the news, and this journalistic genius came on. This incredible report by Mohammed Amin, the cameraman, and Michael Burke, the journalist. And it showed something that put these pathetic problems of mine into a sort of ridiculous personal perspective. And what it showed us was really how terrible we can be towards each other as human beings.
Tell people, because it's 40 years old, people who have no idea what you're talking about, some of them have a certain generation, just haven't had the chance to, or just are becoming aware of it today because of why we're here talking about it in some way. What were you looking at that was so visceral and so game-changing for you?
It was the worst famine of the 20th century. It was the longest-running war of the 20th century. This thing we now call climate change was happening. We didn't understand that then, but it created massive drought across a region of the Sahel, the Sahel means shore. Sahara means ocean. So south of the Sahara, across that belt, but particularly in northern Ethiopia, where a civil war, the longest war of the 20th century, was raging. So the people were just in extremis, and I mean the imagery was just absolutely appalling. And we were riveted, this little family in London, and Paula started crying, not sobbing, but just tears, and she just grabbed the baby and ran upstairs because she associated particularly with the mothers and fathers and their children. They're the hopelessness. I mean, imagine being a mum and dad and simply not able to keep your children alive so that they died in your hands.
And did Paula put a bowl on the table at some point?
Yeah, so we didn't talk about it. I was, like the journalist, I was so ashamed, so angry. So went to watch the rest telly that night, went to bed. Next morning I woke up and Paula was the host of the go-to rock and roll show of the 80s, The Tube, with Jules Holland. And on the bowl, she'd gone up to Newcastle to make the show, and in the bowl on the kitchen table was a note saying anyone who comes to this house puts £5 in the bowl for Ethiopia. And I thought, that's good, but it had dwelt on my mind all night. And I thought, this requires something more than putting a quid in the Oxfam box or something. This requires something of the self. This is too much. This is more than a disaster. This is a sort of wound. And the only thing I could do was write tunes. But as I said, my tunes were no longer guaranteed. For 10 years, every Rats single had been almost a guaranteed hit. And that wasn't so anymore. So I called Paul and I said, who's on the Tube this week? And she said, Midge. And Midge Ure from Ultravox was, I think, number 2 at the time. And I said, did you see it last night? And he said, no, what? And I said, and I knew him from Thin Lizzy when he was with Thin Lizzy. And I was described, he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I think we should make a record. So as the Rats weren't guaranteed a hit, the immediate logic was get everyone you've known for 10 years to record, and then for certain it's a hit. And make enough money and get out by Christmas.
Had you thought about doing a cover the way we associate with, and which songs were candidates for the cover?
Well, Midge said, what do you want to do? And I was embarrassed because he was now the hit songwriter and mine wasn't. So there was a loss of confidence, and I said, I don't know, let's do a cover or something. He said, like what? And I said, some appropriate Dylan song sort of thing. And he said, no. He said, let's write something. You do something and I'll do something. We'll see what happens. So that genuinely gave me confidence. For whatever reason in this whole story, the people I talked to were exactly right for me. Harvey Goldsmith for Live Aid, setting up Band Aid, John Kennedy, all these people who've stayed with this for the last 40 years was exactly right.
So if you believed in it, you could have been constantly nudged in the right direction. Like, for example, if it wasn't Midge that night on the Tube, if it was another artist who said, I didn't see it, good luck with that. Constantly
it's
all this going on.
It's too much of a coincidence. I mean,
so what is it if it's not a coincidence?
I did know the other guys. I did know Duran. I did know Spandau. I did know George Michael because of the Tube. And they'd come down to my Rockstar house at the time, because I'd been in the game 10 years, and they'd flake out on the floor. I mean, I've got Polaroids of Le Bon just sleeping in my sitting room floor, and the girlfriend of the weekend would be looking a bit bemused and shifty, as her Lothario was asleep on the carpet, So
that's your insurance money.
Yeah. So it's it really is a young man and young woman's game. Yeah. You're 24 hours and then you're sunk out.
So you call the best in the business. I mean, it's an extraordinary array of people. Was it 37 artists essentially of the biggest, if you can imagine, the biggest acts of their day between 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. roughly speaking. And I think it's Notting Hill. Is that right? Where you all get Chelsea. Was Trevor Horn involved at that stage?
This was on the actual recording.
On the recording.
Well, so after Midge said, you do something and I'll do something.
Yeah.
I had this song for the Rats called It's My World. And they'd said, now we've done something like that before. It's the worst thing in the world, showing the band your song. They kind of go, what the chords then? And I was going, it's my world and there's no need to be afraid. And they were saying, no, not that. That's rubbish. So great, thanks, guys. But going to Midge's, I was in a bit of a panic. What do I actually bring to him? And in the car, I thought of It's My World. And I just said, it's Christmas time. And there's no need to be afraid.
So the original, you had the bones of it as a song. So
I had the basis of the melody, and I had words for It's My World, and there's no need to be afraid. Wow. But once I had that, I was on the thing that contrasts between our world, our cornucopia of everything, and outside that window, the absolute nothing that these people have. bad, and that's wrong. And so it's 40 years of bringing that to the highest political and economic tables of the world.
Which brings us to the single we're going to play now, and we're going to talk afterwards,
Yeah,
by the way, about impact. Why don't you introduce this? I'll play it when you introduce it.
It really is so beautiful, this song. This is Trevor Horn, and it was my idea to put together the three official versions of Band Aid, three generations, 84, 2004, 2014. And Trevor said, how? And he said, they all sing the same words. I said, repeat the lines. And he goes, that's ridiculous. I said, try it. And then he said, what do we do there? I said, look, just take it and do it. What he's produced, honestly, is so beautiful, and it describes the arc of British rock and roll over 40 years, and describes the triumph that Britain achieved, because as soon as this little pop tune came out in 1998, the world followed, and after the world followed, everything just happened. And this is Band Aid 40. This is for me, the best version. Try and work out who's singing. Three generations, from Sting to Harry Styles, from Bono to middle-aged Bono to older Bono, with Sinead in the middle, Chris Martin, Tom York, Paul McCartney, everyone. Try and work out who's who, but just listen to this work of art.
That is the 40th anniversary version of Do They Know It's Christmas. What a privilege to sit here with you live in studio, Bob Geldof, talking as you're sitting, go, who's that? And I felt like the teacher in the class go, I don't know, is it Bob? Is it I got a few right, but Chris Martin, listen, congratulations on that. You are like the proud father listening to that. Honestly, you are.
It's not me, it's what Trevor Horn has done. I mean, the massive talent. Yeah. Over 40 years. And then when you hear George Michael and you hear Sinead.
When I heard Sinead, I stopped.
And then, on the week that Liam has been buried, to hear him in there, with 1D. Yeah. And that there's so much going on emotionally in that track,
The song is tied up for a lot of people in nostalgia. And, like Christmas anyway is, because it throws this big magnifying glass in it for people and lovers and life that you had or don't have. And, to hear some of the singers that we all had in our lives gone now, and if they were friends of yours or some were friends of mine, and it doesn't matter. The point I'm making is, in some ways, that that was an emotional listen, that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing the rounds today, and literally, the old hard nuts in the control rooms are literally blubbing, especially when you hear it. Yeah, it brings back things, but it's so real. And now, you asked me to describe 40 years ago. The truth is, Ryan, that's happening now. And it really is the same. A brutal war, damaged gang rapes, damaged women, hungry children, going to bed again without food. And it is Christmas. And bizarrely, in our culture, it's the time when we do take notice of others. We give gestures of our affection. The family suppresses the dramas and traumas. We sit down, we break bread. But you also notice more keenly the guy on the street who's got nowhere to go, the old lady in the cold flat. We notice that. And
Can I point out as well to people who say the lyrics are a bit out of touch and whatever? Listen to that song. That song has evolved lyrically. Yeah. It's evolved emotionally. So enough with the keyboard warrior for a moment, and just the reality of it is what you've just described. That's what this is about. Don't be picking up on this song or that bit of the song. No. This is about decency, and it's about solidarity, and it's about brother and sisterhood of man and woman. And I think that's the message here.
It is. I mean, from the very beginning was like that, like we're lucky parts of the world, but hold on, just outside there, and great, well done you, good luck. But outside there's a different world, and throw your arms around the world at Christmas time. I don't have a problem with that.
How are we going to get money into the pocket of this charity where it needs to be, in the sense that when I was 11 years old and this record was, we all went out and we bought the vinyl. Yeah, I have it at home. We had the 12-inch, we had the whole lot. It was beautiful artwork, of course, we should mention, because it was just so old.
And still is. The new one is fantastic.
Peter Blake, is that?
Yeah, again, Peter Blake.
Who was Sergeant Pepper's guy. So with all of that in mind, my point is this: we don't go and buy records now, obviously. And if you can download it a billion times, it's probably worth a tenner. So how do we do this?
This one, they're doing a big physical thing because the artwork is so beautiful. So if you can find a record shop, go and buy it, then we make money. The streams, if there's billions of them, we make some money. The downloads, we make money as well. But the main thing to remember is that here's a meal, here's a hungry child, and you are in between. And I swear to you, like I did 40 years ago, last week alone, we spent money from what you did with this record on 8,000 more children so they'd have something to eat for the foreseeable future, and 300,000 people accessing health for the first time ever. And that's this small pop song. So if you can get to it, just keep streaming, find the shop, go and buy it, because between that hungry child and that meal is this record and you. And I swear to you that we have no agency, we have no control over the horrors in Ukraine or the horrors of Palestine, the fear of what Trump will do next, the fear of the cost of living and inflation and climate change. But with this single issue, with this one issue, we have agency, we have power, we can actually change another's life. And just a device for doing that is this little piece of record. But it also turns out to be a bit of rock and roll history. It's British rock for the last 40 years, the best, with a magnificent production. So all of those things, you know, why not? Buy all the other records too, but get a few of these.
Bob Geldof, don't change. Happy Christmas to you and your family, and thanks for being with us today.